So the Indiana Fever have signed Justine Passat to a developmental contract. What does that mean? It essentially means she's not going to be with the team. Barring injuries, she's not going to make the team. It means that she's realistically not fighting for a spot in the squad in preseason, that she's just kind of there to be there. And when it comes down to it, we already know who the developmental slots are. So for the Indiana Fever to sign anyone other than Jessica Timmons to the other developmental slot, they would have to cut them and then wait 48 hours, then bring them in. So for Megan McConnell, because she signed a training camp contract, they would have to cut her, wait for her to come in, and then sign her. So the reason why Justine Passat signed to a developmental contract is purely because the Indiana Fever were going to cut her anyway. And they want a right of first refusal on her. So let's just be honest. Justine Passat will get signed by another team. She will get signed by another team. I don't know if she will get signed by another team to a developmental contract. Definitely. Like if they cut her, if they just waived her, she would get signed developmental somewhere else. She might get a full contract somewhere else. And that's tomorrow. And they don't want to do that. They don't want to put her on a training camp contract. Because if they put her on a training camp contract, it means that they have to waive her, cut her at the end of training camp. What that means is any team can sign her. So they don't have control over where she goes. But also, they don't really have control over where she goes anyway. So by signing her to developmental slot means that teams cannot sign her to a developmental deal. However, developmental slot in the WNBA is essentially a practice player. They get paid $750 a week. Yes, $750 a week. But if they get called up for a game, they get $6,000. They get $6,000. It is significantly more beneficial for these players financially to go play in Mexico than to be a developmental slot player. Ironically, it is probably better financially for them to go play in one of the leagues that happen during the WNBA season with a get-out clause for the WNBA in their contract. That being said, if another team wants Justine Passat, she's gone. It is as simple as that. The Indiana Fever are not cutting anybody. They promised Shatori Walker-Kimbrough a role. They're not cutting Raven Johnson. KK Timpson, they're not going to cut her. If they were going to cut KK Timpson, they would have already, because she was completely garbage overseas. If they were going to cut her, they would have cut her already. But for Justine Passat, this is what the GM has said, Amber Cox. We wanted to lock Justine in. She's a bit of a unicorn that she led the SEC in three-point shooting, and she's 6'4". She still has some growth areas, obviously, as all rookies do coming into the league. We really want to see what she can do as a part of this roster. What signing her developmental pool now allows us to do, instead of putting her in a standard player contract, we get to the end of camp and waiving her. Then you put her on the waiver for someone else to pick her up. She's already with us, so that gives us a bit more control over her destiny. So basically, she's as good as said, well, she's not making the roster. And if you guys don't know, if there's no injuries, she is not playing anyway. But if another team picks up an injury, you don't have to call up a developmental pool slot. So let's just say the New York Liberty. The New York Liberty, I don't think the Liberty, you know what, they might as a 12th spot. But let's just say Beck Allen goes down injured for the New York Liberty. And the New York Liberty are like, you know what, there is this 6'4" shooter in Indiana. We can give her a shot. If it doesn't work out, we can cut her and then bring her back into the developmental pool. We can risk that. So the New York Liberty, let's say Beck Allen gets injured in preseason. In a week, well, in 10 days, they can go and say, you know what, we actually want to sign Justine Passat to a roster contract. The Indiana Fever don't have to cut somebody, or she's gone. And they're not going to cut somebody. And the problem with signing her to a developmental contract is that, and speaking about it in this way, is that it's very, very clear she doesn't have a chance of making the roster. Because by the way, like if she beats out somebody, what should be happening is that no role should be promised to Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. No role should be promised to KK Timpson. Justine Pizzot should be fighting it out with these players for a roster spot. And even if they sign her on a developmental deal for flexibility, what should have been said is that not, oh, we're going to get to the end of training camp, then we're going to waive her, and we need to make sure another team doesn't pick her up. It should have literally just been, we are trying to, like, Justine Pizzot is we're signing her to a developmental slot, as if she doesn't make the final roster, it gives us some control over her destiny. But we fully expect her to fight it out for a roster spot and potentially get it converted to a full spot. There's a difference. One of those is saying, there's a chance. Another is what we've seen here is that before the ball has been dribbled. And to say, oh, she has a lot of growth areas. Man, KK Timpson, I mean this. You see the iron behind me? The iron behind me. If the iron behind me, like KK Timpson's court awareness was so bad that if you asked KK Timpson and she was on the court to find the iron, she might not find it. Like, her awareness of what's going on around her on the basketball court, I've never seen it at the adult level. Actually, I have. I played with a guy this season. Fantastically skilled player, but had this, I would say, quite similar awareness to KK Timpson. And it was only in this scenario being like, okay, it can be very tough if a player's awareness is that bad on everybody else. Like, 5 players are kind of making up for KK Timpson. And she's genuinely a liability 80% of the time and an asset 20. And I have for pure spacing alone, from like Chloe Bibby did significantly better for the Fever than KK Timpson. And Justine Pizzot is worst case scenario with what the Fever did last year. She's not better than Chloe Bibby. Like, if you watch Chloe Bibby's all-around game, it's much better. But for what the Fever need her to do, stand outside the 3-point line, shoot the 3, and sometimes catch a rebound. Because, like, she does have areas to grow. But the fact is that even a year ago, it was like, you know what, with KK and these other players, like, you know what, they're fighting for a roster spot. They've signed her to a developmental deal. And by the way, you might be saying, oh, but that's what a developmental deal. No. Maureen Fauteux is on a developmental deal. And with the expectation that when she's back, when she's 100% and 100% ready to go, she has a roster spot. That is what the New York Liberty have done. Frida Booner is on a developmental deal for Portland. And so she's not coming over for another 2 weeks. So she's not there for training camp and some preseason. So they signed her to a developmental deal so that when she gets over, she has a week or two to get herself used to the pace, used to practice, and then they're going to call her up. There have been multiple people signed to developmental deals. And with the expectation of them being called up, there are players signed to developmental deals with the expectations of fighting it out for the last spot on the team. The Indiana Fever are the only team that have basically said their developmental players aren't even fighting for a roster spot. And the worst part is the ball hasn't been dribbled. A ball has not been dribbled. And it's whatever about making her developmental. You can see it from Amber Cox here. They have basically just said, you know what, she's not in the roster. She's not in the roster. And like, all Amber Cox is doing is talking about, guard depth and vets and everything. We don't need a backup to a backup's backup. No team has ever needed that, but apparently the Fever do. Anyway, see you guys.